everything is prepared, I'll get my notes for my intro. Okay, I think we are good to go.
Hey.
Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to our live stream. This is Meryl with Akron Soul Train, and tonight I am joined by Mike Johnson, Chief of Conservation for the Summit Metro Parks, to talk about invasive species, conservation, and the arts. This discussion accompanies Akron Soul Train's exhibit of new work by resident artist Keith Lemley, titled Ghost Forest, and you can see a little sneak peek behind me there. Lemley used felled ash trees from his property and wanted to highlight the plight of the emerald ash borer, an invasive species that has decimated ash trees throughout Northeast Ohio. Ghost Forest is currently on view at Akron Soul Train's Burton D. Morgan Foundation exhibition space in downtown Akron and will be up until April 2nd. Our gallery hours are Wednesday to Saturday from 11 to 4 p.m. We will also be doing a virtual walkthrough and artist talk with Keith live on Facebook next Monday, March 7th at 7 p.m. So you can see that right here again next week. Akron Soul Train is an artist residency program connecting and empowering the community and artists by granting fellowships that provide resources for all creative disciplines to foster a more vibrant Akron. Before we get going, I'd like to thank our sponsors for their continued support: the GAR Foundation, Akron Community Foundation, the Ohio Arts Council, the Leaner Family Foundation, the Brennan Family Foundation, the Knight Foundation, the Char and Chuck Fowler Family Foundation, and the Corbin Foundation. Anyone that is viewing, please comment below with any questions and we will get to them towards the end of the program. Also, please comment on any of our videos how you are liking this type of virtual programming so we can continue to bring you thoughtful and creative content. Okay, Mike, I'm gonna hand it over to you. And we'll get started. You can introduce yourself, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you again. Thank you so much for having me here and the opportunity to speak. Again, my name is Mike Johnson. I'm the Chief of Conservation with the Summit Metro Parks, and basically I'm the Chief Park Biologist, so to speak. Tonight, the topic of my presentation tonight is a little unusual for me. I'm going to talk about EAB, or emerald ash borer, which is a horrible invasive species that, in this case, an insect that's wreaking havoc on our ecosystems. I'm going to talk a little bit about conservation, especially as it relates to EAB, but also in a broader context, like conservation for our region. And whenever possible, I'm going to try to draw analogies between what we do in conservation and the biological and ecological sciences and the arts. A little bit first about who we are. We are the Summit Metro Parks. We conserve, sustainably manage, and value natural resources for the health and enjoyment of our community, and to inspire people to connect with nature through clean and safe parks. At our very core, we are a conservation organization. This is the conservation crew at the Metro Parks. We are biologists, ecologists, fisheries people. We have botanists on staff. We have 2 archaeologists and a park historian as well. At Summit Metro Parks, the resources that we conserve are not just natural resources. We're also really big on preserving and protecting our cultural resources. And a cultural resource could be anything, a historic feature like the canal, the prism of the canal. It can also be prehistoric resources. So that's what conservation is at Summit Metro Parks. And whenever you're doing conservation in a park, this is what it's really all about. Conservation in public parks is a balancing act between protecting and preserving and allowing recreation. Anytime you allow people into a natural area, it comes at a cost. It's almost kind of like an art museum. Anytime you put art out on display, to some degree, you're endangering that art. It'd be much safer tucked away behind the scenes. But really, what's the point of having it at that point if all you're doing is protecting it? So it's really kind of a balancing act. It's a balancing act in the arts, and it's definitely, I think, it's a balancing act in the biological sciences. So EAB, or emerald ash borer, what is this? The emerald ash borer is a small, really kind of pretty looking beetle. It's this almost iridescent green. It's a small beetle, and it hosts on ash trees. And here in the United States, the emerald ash borer will host on any of our ash trees. Emerald ash borer is a non-native species. It was introduced from Asia accidentally. It actually came into this country, we're pretty sure, it came in on pallets, on ship containers. So the wooden pallets, I mean, we've all seen them. If you're like me, you probably have some in your backyard. The insect larvae were in the wood of the pallets. They came in, they emerged as adults, and they spread from there. Again, this is a non-native and invasive insect. The life cycle of the insect is that in the younger stages of the organism, the pupae, the larvae stages, the adults lay their eggs under the cambium, under the bark of ash trees. The larvae grow under the bark, and they basically consume the very thin layer of tissue that's between the bark and the pulp of the wood. This is really the part of the tree that's really alive. It's the part of the tree that has that conducts water flow and nutrients from the roots to the leaves. It's a really critical tissue of the plants. Because emerald ash borers are not native to this country, they don't have any natural control. Our ash trees are not adapted. They don't have their own physiological defenses to the presence of ash borer, and there are no natural predators that are able to control the emerald ash borer. So once they were introduced into this country, they very quickly took over. This is an example of an infected ash tree. This is what you would see just under the bark. All of these little burrows are tunnels that were dug by the larvae. And as they dig those tunnels through the wood, they destroy the tissue that transports nutrients and water between the roots and the canopy of the tree. And the tree very quickly dies. Takes about 5 to 7 years from the moment the tree is infected. It takes about 5 or 7 years for the tree to actually die. Emerald ash borer has spread pretty much throughout most of the range of ash. So this map, everything in green, these are our native ash trees. These are areas where we have native ash in our forests. And the red dots are all of the known population outbreaks and infestations. At Summit Metro Parks, when we found that we had emerald ash borer in our parks, the first thing we did was take a really close look at our ash and when really how many do we have, what percentage of the canopy are they? And we were pretty fortunate because although we do have a lot of ash in our parks, most of the ash trees that we had were in the smaller size range. They were more in the seedling category, and that's illustrated by this bar right here. Most of the larger trees we have in our forest are primarily in the oak category. So we didn't have as many trees as ash trees as they do in other parts of the country. I know for a fact that Toledo region, because of the topography out there, it's very flat, it's very wet. They had just a huge predominance of green ash that were really causing problems, not only in terms of loss of forest for biodiversity, but it was causing a lot of problems because these trees were falling on property and infrastructure. They were also falling into waterways and causing flooding problems. When we're dealing with invasive species and biodiversity, a question often comes up, and that's really like, who cares, or why should I care? With emerald ash borer, there's a really easy answer to emerald ash borer, and that is, emerald ash borer can cause economic problems for us. It can cause health and safety problems for us. The ash tree is a commercial product, and we don't want to lose that. But emerald ash borer is really part of emerald ash borer is a really tiny little example of a much, much bigger problem. And that is the problem that we face with invasive species. And an invasive species can be plant or animal or even fungi coming into our country and destroying our native biodiversity. 99% of the time, the average person on the street never notices or hears about the damage that is being caused to our biodiversity because of an invasive species. And when I talk about biodiversity and protecting biodiversity, there really are a lot of similarities between the conservation of our natural resources and art. When I talk to people about protecting biodiversity, I usually find that they fall into one of these two categories. There are the people who just get it, the people who understand that biodiversity has intrinsic value. Nature has value. It's like history. History has value. Why do we protect the books in a library? Because these have value to us, even if we never read them. And if you ever have a moment, take a look at what I call the Great Acts of Congress: the Endangered Species Act, the Historic Preservation Act, the National Foundation on the Arts and Humanities Act. These were great acts of Congress, and they weren't really very long, wordy acts of Congress. They really just said, this was the American people speaking through our elected representatives, and we just said, we value these things. We don't really need another reason than that. Human beings value biodiversity, just like we value art, and we are going to protect it, and we are going to commit resources to do that. So that's one group of people. I think that's probably most of us in the audience today. There is another group of people. There is the selfish group. I think all of us are art appreciators. We're in the intrinsic group. The selfish group, I call them the art investors. Nature, like art, can have monetary value. You never know when a plant or an animal or an insect is going to be, we're going to learn something from it that we can exploit and make into some sort of a useful product that we can sell and get rich. Almost all of our medicines come from plants or fungi. And in many respects, there's a lot of similarities to art. If you don't appreciate the beauty of art, you can at least appreciate that art is worth money. I particularly am more into the beauty side and the intrinsic. These are some of our native ash during their fall foliage. And I think it's really sad that we don't get to see this color around here very much anymore. They were some of my favorite, most vibrant colors that I would look for in fall. And again, that's the intrinsic, the selfish. Art and nature are valuable because somebody can find a way to turn a buck off of it. You can even invest in art today. You can put it into your 401k. You can own a piece of a Banksy if you wanted to do that. So that second group of people, they've really keyed into at least the monetary value of art. I don't know. I guess I'll take what I can get. At least it might help with the preservation of both art and our natural resources. Like I said, invasive species can be animal, vegetable, they can even be fungus. And the problems that they cause can be quite severe. Case in point, the bat that you see over here, these are two bats. This is a little brown bat over here. This one is a federally endangered northern long-eared bat. This bat over here, it's got this puffy white stuff around its face. That puffy white stuff is a fungus, and it is a disease fungus called white nose syndrome. This fungus was introduced to the United States accidentally by cavers. So somebody went over to Europe and they went caving underground. And when they came back home to the United States, actually to the New York region, they went caving, and their equipment was, unbeknownst to them, their equipment was infected with this fungus. So they released spores into the cave where these bats hibernated. This fungus very quickly has spread throughout the entire country. It has affected almost all of our bats that hibernate in caves. This is being called by the World Wildlife Federation has called this the single greatest extinction event in North America. When white nose syndrome enters a cave habitat, it kills about 99% of the bats. The bat that is over to my right, this northern long-eared bat, 10 years ago, it was one of the most common bats we had in our area. Today, because of white nose syndrome, it's almost gone. And, you know, not very many people are really aware of white nose syndrome or the effect that it's having. And that's one of the reasons, well, there's two reasons. One reason that you really don't hear that much about it is because these bats do not have an immediate or direct commercial value. So a lot of people don't pay attention to the extinction of these animals because it's not going to affect their bottom line or their everyday life. Another reason you don't hear a lot about the loss of these bats is because they're nocturnal. And because they're nocturnal, you very rarely see them. I like to give an analogy between bats and birds. Many of you have probably seen these birds. You've all seen these birds. They're very common. They're a daily part of our life. What if I told you within a year they were going to be extinct? Not just impacted or hurt, but simply gone from the face of the earth forever. This is what we are dealing with white nose syndrome and our bats. It's a silent invasion and a silent extinction. So a little bit more about invasive species. You know, emerald ash borer is a good example of an invasive insect, but most of our invasive species are plants. And many of those plants that are invasive, they are brought over here intentionally to be used in landscapes. This white flowering shrub, many of you have seen these. Many of you may even have them in your yard. This is a Bradford pear. It's often also called a calorie pear. And the nursery industry is really good at marketing these. Around here, the nurseries will sell them as the Cleveland pear. In Detroit, they're sold as the Detroit pear, but they're all the same thing. It's a European pear tree. Interestingly, it's a pear tree that does not bear fruit. So right off the bat, anybody who bred a fruit tree that doesn't actually bear fruit should be punished. This tree just has beautiful flowers. Unfortunately, this tree does not stay where it is planted. This tree is escaping into our natural areas where they are taking over. They have very little value to our local wildlife, and the effects on our biodiversity are rippling through the ecosystem. These are very common street trees, and if you drive through Fairlawn in the spring, you'll notice that the entire Market Street through Fairlawn is lined with nothing but these beautiful, but unfortunately toxic and biologically dangerous trees. You know, one of the problems with these is that they're still being sold today. We know that these trees are a problem, but this is just one example. You can go to Home Depot or Lowe's and you can pick up a dozen or so trees or plants that we know for a fact are causing us a lot of problems in our natural areas. At the metro parks, we spend thousands of dollars and tens of thousands of hours removing these non-native species from our parks and natural areas. And you know, to some degree, a lot of these species, like Bradford pear, they've been here for a long time. We're probably never going to eliminate them. It's almost like the cat is out of the bag on these. I almost wish that we could make a deal with the nursery industry, stop importing new things, and we'll let you keep selling the old things that we know are bad. But unfortunately, that's not the case, and the nursery industry is on a never-ending quest to find new species around the world to import into our country, just because there's a never-ending neighbor war to keep up with each other and have the next best thing. I just did a quick search to see what was the new tree this year to plant, and welcome the pink trumpet tree. It is beautiful, aggressive, disease-resistant, and from South America, but it'll grow great right here in Ohio. Who knows what future problems this tree is going to cause. So what can we do? Well, really, the most proactive thing we can do is stop importing new species, or at least have better regulations on the import of new species. Now, interestingly, there is an agency, a federal agency, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and they are very, very good at monitoring and keeping an eye out and stopping the import of species that might impact commercial crops. They don't pay any attention to species that might just have an impact to overall biodiversity. Their goal is to protect commercial crops. They are very concerned and very active in the removal of emerald ash borer and treating emerald ash borer. And the reason is our forest resources are considered a commercial crop. So there has been a huge amount of federal funding going into trying to stop or intercept emerald ash borer. So again, what can we do? The first thing, we can be proactive and stop importing these things. We can also, but we tend to be more reactive. Every year, we spend billions of dollars in a never-ending battle with invasive species. When it came to emerald ash borer, the first thing we tried to do was quarantine and destroy. The emerald ash borer was first detected in Detroit, just real close to us. And the first thing that they did, it's sort of like containing a disease, is isolate and quarantine. One of the very first things they did is the states around here, they implemented a ban on transporting firewood. So you weren't allowed to transport firewood from an infested area outside. And the state police were actually very proactive. They would pull people over, and if you had wood in your car, they would confiscate the wood and fine you for it. So the feds were pretty serious about trying to stop emerald ash borer when it first hit our country. Oh, this was probably, I want to say, 2000 and maybe 2010 or 11. It might have been earlier. I can't remember. But anyway, that epicenter was Detroit. It very quickly spread to Ohio, that Toledo area. And here in Toledo, by the time, when they realized it was starting to spread, their approach was not only quarantine, but it was almost like a slash and burn um, um, technique. So they would go into these infected areas and they would cut down all the trees, just get everything down. They wanted to literally create a dead zone of no trees so that the insects couldn't spread. And the hope then was that those insects, those infestations would just sort of burn out. So they wanted to remove all the fuel that the insects needed to breed, and hopefully they would just burn out. Unfortunately, that did not work. It almost never works, especially when the thing that you were trying to contain has wings. So the next thing that you can do with regards to emerald ash borer, there are some chemicals that you can use to treat individual trees. Now, these chemicals cannot be sprayed on the trees. That does not work. They have to be absorbed by the roots. The chemicals that are available that can be treated, that can be used to treat trees, we started doing this a little bit at the metro parks. We wanted to save a few individual trees, not necessarily so much for biodiversity, but we wanted to save a few for posterity, so that we would always have one or two. And if you ever wanted to see what an ash tree used to look like, you could come to the park and see one, almost like in a museum. And it's a pretty nasty chemical. It's a very strong human carcinogen. It literally has to be injected into the tree. You have to do it every single year. And the reason we finally stopped doing it is this particular insecticide, it will kill the emerald ash borer that tries to feed on the tree. Unfortunately, it will kill everything that tries to feed on the tree. Even the native insects we have that have learned to live in a balance with the ash trees, when they try to host on the ash tree, it kills them too. So because of these two things, one, because it's a non-discriminant herbicide or insecticide, and because some of our staff expressed concerns about using it, we decided to discontinue that. We are not utilizing any of these insecticides anymore. And unfortunately, the ash trees that we were treating have all died and been cut down. So the last thing that you can do when you're trying to work with the ash, and really probably the best, it still has some issues as well, is biological control. And what we did at Metro Parks is we brought in, let me back up. We worked with USDA. They were importing 3 species of wasps that are natural predators on emerald ash borer. They're parasitic. They lay their eggs on the larvae of the ash borer and eat them literally while they're alive. Now, these things are really tiny. You can see some in this cup that we have moving around. There are 3 different ones that we utilize. These ones are actually the biggest. And we released them in our parks at Sand Run, Furnace Run, and O'Neill Woods. I think we actually, Furnace Run is in Richfield. We released them for a number of years in hopes that they would flourish and maybe help bring some of that population dynamics back under control. To the best of our knowledge, it hasn't worked, at least not yet. Bringing in a biological control from another country is also, potentially perilous as well, because we don't really know if these parasitic wasps, will they stop with emerald ash borer? I hope so. But there's always the chance that they won't stop with emerald ash borer, and they'll start to parasitize our native insects and cause even more problems. We don't know. There is a process that the USDA has to go through before they can import these things. All we can do is trust that they did go through that process and keep our fingers crossed. So what else do we do, outside of emerald ash borer to manage our habitats at the metro parks? Like I said, emerald ash borer is just one example of a much, much bigger problem. We do a lot of management work to control invasive species, mostly plant species. We do use a lot of chemicals. We use herbicides to kill invasive plant species in our landscapes. Right now, for a lot of the species we work with, this is the only tool we have. I hope that we are doing the right thing. But sometimes I wonder if in 20 years, the next generation of biologists are going to look at what we did and shake their heads, like, what were they thinking? But this is the standard tool. This is very much standard practice in park districts and conservancies and natural areas all across the country. For the most part, the metro parks, we use glyphosate, which is the chemical name for Roundup. There are other ways to manage or control invasive species. A lot of our native species have adapted and they're very tolerant of fire. And a lot of the invasive species that we have in our country are not tolerant of fire. So burning them out is an option. And we do this in some areas. It is obviously, it's not appropriate in all of our parks, especially those that are in high density neighborhoods. But in some areas where it is possible to utilize this, it's a great tool. And it's just a really cool thing to see happen. If you should ever join our Friends of Metro Parks or become a donor to our foundation, we often will invite our special friends out to see events like this. This is a prescribed controlled burn that we did at Springfield Bog Metro Park. And we're using, this is standard procedure where you use 2 lines of fire. The lines of fire are moving towards each other, and when they meet, they will burn each other out. They will have exhausted all the fuel. You can see on the ground, that's our staff. They're down there with vehicles that have water tanks. We have mechanical controllers to put out fires in case anything jumps. If you look over here, I think that's me, and I'm just watching. And we had a group of people out that day that I was with, and we were letting them observe this in action. It's really a super cool thing to see and experience. It's almost like safely getting to experience a tornado or a hurricane where nobody gets hurt. And it's just a really cool thing to see. Within days, this field was green again. Everything greened right back up and bloomed that year, pretty much all native species. So fire is really one of my favorite tools for managing our biodiversity. And this is Springfield Bog. This is what it looked like a few months after our burn. Another view, one of the most photographed views in the park. We also do a lot of work with restoring habitats, and when we do habitat restoration, it usually involves removing invasives. And our philosophy when we restore habitats, what's good for these guys is good for these guys. And just a few examples of some of our restoration projects. This was Springfield Bog. This is what it looks like today, but when we bought it, it looked like this. It was an old farm. There's a neat aerial view. We saw this little depression area. We decided to work with that and work with the landscape and turning it into a wetland. If you look up here, that's the Goodyear blimp. We're very close to the hangar. I wanted to call this Blimp City Park, but nobody would go with me. It's Springfield Bog. But in any case, we decided to take that little depressional area in that soybean field, and we created it into the beautiful wetland area that you see today when you're out there on a hike. Pond Brook was another, actually, I'm sorry, I'm not going to talk about Pond Brook. Just really quick, this is Talmadge Meadows at Monroe Falls Metro Park. We found some streams that had been impacted, and we decided to restore some of those habitats. We broke up tile pipes underground that was diverting water from the wetlands. And as soon as we did that, within days, we had this beautiful swamp appear. All the water had been previously drained. We just put the water back. And when we put the water back, all this really great wildlife showed up, all these frogs, different species. There was one thing, though, that was missing, and that was our beloved spotted salamander. It's one of our native species. They have a harder time. They're not as mobile as frogs, so they have a harder time finding new habitats. So we decided to help them. We went out and collected egg masses, and we seeded that wetland. We monitored, and 7 years later, the first babies had grown to adults and had returned to that pond to breed. So we were so excited. It was just last year, we caught thousands and thousands of spotted salamanders breeding in that pond. Valley View is the last example that I want to give on how we restore environments. You know, when we got Valley View is our newest park. It's in Akron. It's across the street. It's part of Cascade Valley Metro Park. When we acquired it, it was a golf course. And like most golf courses, it was dominated by non-native and invasive species, turf grass, mostly. And a lot of Norway spruce trees. As the name implies, Norway spruce trees are not from here. They're from Norway. This is a map that shows where Valley View is, that orange. It's nestled in between the cities of Akron and Cuyahoga Falls along the banks of the Cuyahoga River. We have about a mile of Cuyahoga River in Valley View, but the importance of Valley View is seen not so much in this map, but in this one, that shows how it connects to all of our other conservation areas in that region. So now we have 4 parks that are connected by Valley View: Gorge, Valley View South, Valley View North, and Sandra Metro Park are now connected by this Valley View purchase and this continuous river of beautiful river, the Cuyahoga River, flowing through these areas. When we got Valley View, like I said, it was lush and green, and the very first thing we did was get rid of all that non-native turf grass. We wanted to restore a natural native habitat. And the only way we could do that was with herbicide. We actually hired Davy Golf to come out, and they treated the land about 3 or 4 times. Usually Davy Golf is hired to keep golf courses lush and green and non-native. We essentially hired them to, we hired them to murder our golf course, and they did do that. They did a great job. Now, many people look at this and they kind of gasp, and maybe you're horrified by what I have to say. I hope not, because we have an end goal in mind that is really the best, most natural, most sustainable thing in mind. This is probably a time for a good quote. Some people look for a beautiful place, and some people make a place beautiful. I do not know who Hazrat Inayat Khan is, but he Googles a great quote. We also had to take those non-native trees out. Unfortunately, they had to go. They are very aggressive, and we couldn't restore a natural, beautiful landscape as long as they were there. And again, when you see those pictures, I like to remind everybody that there is this end point, this more sustainable, beautiful, natural environment we're trying to achieve. I just have to draw this particular art analogy. I'm not sure if it's entirely appropriate, but the similarities are just too good. This is Claude Monet's, it's the Old Tree Gorge and the Petite Cruce. It's French, I don't know how you say that, 1889. The story goes that Monet encountered some bad weather while he was painting this. It was a fall or winter scene. He experienced some bad weather and he had to stop. And before he knew it, spring had arrived and the trees were beginning to bloom. So not wanting to change his strategy, Monet had his servants go out and strip all the leaves off of that tree that you see in the valley so that he would not have to change his composition. So this is another art analogy. I couldn't resist using it, although I'm not sure if it really is appropriate, because I think what I did was good, and I think what Monet did was probably not good. But the other similarities are just too good for me not to mention, since I'm trying to draw analogies between what we do in conservation and what artists do. Maybe I would say, sometimes to make an omelet, you have to break a few eggs. Or maybe the moral of the story is scientists or artists were just all jerks. I'm not sure. I hope not. Google caught what we did at Valley View really well. I love the time lapse of this. This is Valley View. When we bought the property, you can see it's a golf course. You've got all those tree lines and nice straight angles, just the way they're supposed to be in nature. That's what it looked like when we got it. Here we're starting to brown it out. We're killing off all that turf. We're continuing to kill off the turf. Now we've gotten rid of all of the non-native trees, and we've seeded it with a native seed mix. That green stuff you see is the native seed mix, just starting to sprout. And a few weeks later, bang! The entire area bloomed. The yellow that you see is a plant that was in the native seed mix. It's called Bidens. It does really good the first couple of years, and then it sort of starts to, it doesn't die off, but it starts to get out-competed by some of the other stuff. But I just think it is so cool that our restoration was visible from space. See, we also took those golf course ponds and turned them back into beautiful functional wetlands. There's just this is a glamour shot, a drone shot of that particular wetland. It also, interestingly, receives a lot of stormwater from Cuyahoga Street that is processed through a series of wetlands and streams before it enters the Cuyahoga River. Again, this is it, but this is a drone footage of the Valley View golf course before. This is after we have treated and gotten rid of all of the non-native turf grass, and immediately after. The thing, though, that's really cool to see is not the yellow flowers. It's this stream that never used to be there. We created that stream by breaking up tile pipes. It now flows into this lush, beautiful wetland before it goes off into the Cuyahoga. Now I like this picture because it really, again, another art analogy. I mean, Valley View was really, as a restoration ecologist, Valley View was a canvas for us. From a ecological perspective, the golf course had absolutely no value. It had no value to our local wildlife, or very little. It was a blank slate. It was a canvas on which we could paint. And sometimes I joke with our landscape architect about what kind of an artist I am, or what kind of an artist he is. I used to think of myself as more of a classic artist, but I have come to learn recently I am a happy tree guy. One thing about Zoom, I don't know if you're laughing or not. I hope you're laughing. I want to end with what you can do, what we all can do, whether it's emerald ash borer or white nose syndrome or anything like that. This is all part of a much broader biodiversity umbrella. And what can you do? And really, the number one thing that you can do as individuals is work with your own property, your own home, or your neighbor's home, or if you rent an apartment, work with a friend's home to introduce native plants back into the residential landscape. Metro Parks is initiating a program. We're starting it this year. It will continue on in perpetuity. We're going to start it with a native plant sale that I believe, let me get my calendar out here. We're going to have it on Saturday, the 28th. We're going to be having a native plant sale. We're bringing in vendors from around the state. These are small vendors that just specialize in native plants. There'll be lectures, presentations, there'll be giveaways. I think we're going to try to get a food truck there. If you haven't been to our Valley View area, it'd be a great time to come, see it, check it out. If you could just plant one native plant in your landscape, that would be great. And definitely, if you have a Bradford pear growing in your yard, chop that thing down and replace it with something native. If you see the city that you live in, if you see them planting trees in the right-of-ways that you know are non-native or invasive, say something to your elected officials that maybe we shouldn't be doing that. So, take action in your homes, take action in your communities. And when you go to Home Depot or Lowe's, take your phone with you. And when you're looking at that new plant, just Google that scientific name and see where that thing's really from. Where is it actually native to? Do you want to install a plant in your yard that was imported from South America or Europe or Asia? You probably don't. Or you might, but just keep in mind, if you do, there are potential consequences associated with doing that. So that is all I have. That's the end of my presentation. Does anyone have any questions or anything you want to ask about either emerald ash borer or anything else that we do with in terms of biodiversity at the parks?
Mike, why don't you stop your screen share, and then that way I can more easily get on Facebook. If anyone viewing has any questions, you can ask those now. I have some questions as well. I think it's really interesting because the invasive species, the biodiversity, these issues really, I feel like the majority of our population knows about environmental pollution, air pollution, water pollution, waste, that stuff. But not everyone knows about these types of environmental issues, which are just as much caused by human interaction. It sounds like, whether it was like by accident or by commercial or corporate greed or want. And I think that that's really interesting that there's not as much awareness about these issues. And someone like Keith Lemley, as an artist, has that special ability to kind of bring more awareness there. So I think that's a role that art can play when looking for these concepts and stuff.
Yes, I agree. And, one interesting thing I've noticed over the years, I work in Akron, I live in Akron. One of the things that I've noticed, there's a difference between the urban and rural people when you think about conservation. When you ask people who live in, like I live in Highland Square, when you ask them about conservation, the first things that come to their mind are recycling, energy efficiency, solar energy, wind power. These are the things that immediately come to their mind. They don't think about wildlife or biodiversity. Those are not the first things that come to their mind. Versus my friends who live in more rural parts of the state, when you mention conservation, the things that come to their minds are wildlife, usually first and foremost. And that's just an artifact of where we live and what we see. I would love to work with, especially artists, to bring more of the wild side of conservation into our urban areas.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing place that art can really bring that awareness. one thing I did want to mention to all of our viewers, next week we'll see this more closely, but in Keith's sculptures, you can see the trails that the emerald ash borer left. That was a really great image that you showed us, and you can really see that in his work. He wanted to leave that mark that the borer left, because they, in a compositional or in an art sense, they really are beautiful, but the reason, the concept, the way they were made has that much deeper destructive meaning, which is very interesting to think about. And I also wanted to comment on, a lot of it seems like, I feel like humans are very bad at appreciating what we have here, or in our place of living. So wanting to bring species from kind of more tropical areas or from other areas of the world, wanting to be exotic or something like that. And we don't necessarily get to appreciate what is actually native to our land. So changing that mindset.
Absolutely. Changing the mindset, and not only appreciating the diversity and the wildlife that we have, the species, the plants, the trees that you can utilize, but also there is an aspect of that. One of the things that people like about non-native exotic landscapes, there's no bugs. There's no bugs because bugs don't like to eat those things. But when we talk about naturalizing our landscape and naturalizing our yards, really kind of teaching people to appreciate the value of insects, all sorts of different kinds of insects in our landscape. They don't, we're not, they don't cause problems, and many of them are really quite beautiful.
Yeah, definitely. How long does it, or how long would it possibly take for, I guess, our native species to adapt, or would it even be possible?
It's possible, yeah. And eventually it is possible, and eventually it will happen. Species around the globe have always found a way to transport themselves one way or another. It's what we are experiencing though today is the rate of transport is so greatly exacerbated by people and by our commercial industry. We are helping these things spread around the globe much faster than they otherwise would have been able to. And the answer is yes, eventually the Bradford pear, something here will find a way to eat Bradford pear. And Bradford pear will eventually blend into the landscape and not become a problem anymore. The question is, how much damage will we incur before that happens? And when you add to that problem the fact that we are importing so many other new stuff at such an alarming rate, at some point, many of the parts of the ecosystem won't be able to keep up, and we will end up with extinction. We will end up with the extinction of some species. So it's kind of a balance. I understand your question. It's kind of a balance. Yes, eventually those non-natives will naturalize into the landscape, but at our current rate of constant introductions, we are experiencing extinction because of invasives.
Wow, that's just an amazing but bad way to hear. So I think the work that you're doing with the conservation of the parks is beautiful, and we're so lucky to have the parks right here in our backyards, and that's one of the things I love about Akron and about this area. So thank you so much for that. Anyone that has questions after this live stream, it will be posted on Facebook and then soon on our YouTube channel. You can ask those, and I can maybe get in contact with Mike again, or we can do some research for you all. So yeah, feel free to ask any questions if you are watching this after the fact. And thank you for everyone that joined us tonight. Mike, thank you so much for the informative, really wonderful presentation. Once again, this talk accompanies our exhibition of new work by Keith Lemley titled Ghost Forest, behind me, which is on view at Akron Soul Train through April 2nd. And our gallery hours are Wednesday through Saturday from 11 to 4 p.m. So you can come and see these pieces in person and see all those details. You can see the marks of the emerald ash borer. Let's see. And then next week, we'll be speaking with Keith about his work, his process, how he finds the trees, how he works with the trees in his studio, how he forms the lights. Really, really cool work. And that will also be streaming live right here on our Facebook page, Monday, March 7th at 7 p.m. So we hope to see you all there. And thank you so much for joining us. Bye.